So after the Ithaca Festival, actually during the Ithaca Festival, to be honest, I was working with my roommate and a good friend of his who was a builder. He's an architect, and we were beginning this conversation around developing co-housing in and around Ithaca. So co-housing is, as you can see from that image there, a rendering of the neighborhood that was developed, is this idea of shared, collective living interdependently. So you have a common facilities, often a co-house, meaning one central facility people use for a large kitchen, library, laundry room, band room for the kids, play space, that type of stuff, gathering space. And then you have your independent home, but on a smaller scale, a micro scale, around those common areas and those common facilities. So you have a kitchenette, and a bedroom and a living room and all those things that you would have in a normal home, but it's on a smaller scale. So, with Eco City or Eco Village at Ithaca and a few others that are sort of these last vestiges of the, sort of the back to landers in the 60s and 70s, who created these intentional communities out west and in Vermont and New England, and a lot of them sometimes were artist communities or creator communities. Some of them just strictly environmentalist, wanted to kind of get off the grid, lighten their load, lessen their impact. So the big thing about our group, which was called Concordium Development at the time, and now is New Earth Living, is that we wanted to look at the already built urban fabric of a city grid, and Ithaca does have that, and see if there were opportunities for infill micro housing and amenity development that could facilitate more community, while also providing a lower cost of living, because a lot of the shared assets are, bringing that overall cost down. So, for example, the shared tool shed, not everybody needs a lawnmower. Everybody shares the same. You have one play space for all the kids. Not everybody has to go out and buy a swing set for their two kids. So, you have shared dinners. It's communal living. My partners owned three properties in the Fall Creek neighborhood. Two had houses on it. One was formerly a house, but it was a vacant lot. And so, as you can see here from that image, again, that recycles back. What was developed out of that was a multi-family co-housing development in the city of Ithaca, in a traditional, inner ring neighborhood. And so there are, micro living units, and they have a common space, they have a common garden, they have a common fire pit, they have shared, tools and resources, and they make decisions together. They have an operating agreement in terms of how they co-live, and so this was a model that we were looking at, not just kind of finding farmland out in the middle of nowhere and building, but integrating into the city, and seeing if it could also mitigate some of the issues around cost of living. You could have a car share. The whole, everybody there can maybe share two vehicles instead of everybody owning their own, and so on and so forth. So we, took a business course, and our partnership went in a different direction for a variety of reasons. Some of it I'll touch on immediately here in a second, but they moved forward and are continuing to do this. So this is a model that they're replicating. Super proud of them. And, this is something, again, back here in Syracuse, I'd like to look at, and these guys are just down the road, that we could lean on. So, what brought me to this interesting thing that on my resume is called the PodCar Project, or the PodCar City Project. And, I'm going to let this video roll for a second, because it sort of, it does a good job of outlining what the premise was. But, while I was working with Concordium Development, as I was finishing off my duties with the Ithaca Festival, we were having conversations in the city about Ithaca becoming a model eco city. Again, kind of even pulling from my Yes Syracuse mayoral campaign, where 20 years from now, if Ithaca was a model eco-city, how did we get there? And we looked at transportation, energy, land use, housing, food systems, and we began a conversation. And I ended up sort of in the container of sustainable transportation. And we'll let this video summarize some of that.
At this track close to Stockholm, a new method of transport is being tested. These futuristic driverless pods are known as PRT, or Personal Rapid Transit Vehicles. Travelling magnetically on rails and powered by electricity, they release no emissions at the point of use. And unlike most forms of public transport, are always available when you need them.
No waiting time, direct travel, it's available around the clock. It's also an advantage for those not traveling with increased safety, that you are usually elevated. You don't have the risk of being run over by vehicles.
The idea is that you simply turn up at your nearest PodCar station, swipe your fare card, program your destination, and a pod turns up soon after to collect you. You can choose to travel alone or with others sharing your destination, and the pod takes you from A to B without stopping at up to 25 miles per hour. Much like a taxi, but without the driver or the risk of getting stuck in traffic.
Today, people think very much that it is either public transportation or private. This technology is a crossover between public and private transport. You decide yourself for any trip. Do I have a flu? Do I want to sit alone today? I use it privately. Otherwise, you can use it publicly.
In which case, the fare is much lower, similar to a bus fare, which in expensive Sweden costs about $3.50. A British company, Advanced Transport Systems, opened their Ultra PodCar track at Heathrow Airport's new Terminal 5 in June. But the Swedish are taking the technology one step further. They plan to spend over €50 million on an inner city track.
To get this into an industrial scale, we need to expand the idea and physically the structure of all these beams that is needed, the guideways, for much longer distances.
A recent study by engineering consultancy WSP showed that PodCars could yield a better profit margin than other forms of public transport, as long as the cost per kilometre was kept below $7.3 million. Currently, the estimate for the pilot track is closer to $10 million. But this profit calculation doesn't take into account that PodCars could be used for far more than just passenger transport.
I certainly think this system can yield a profit because it will be used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, both for personal travel and freight goods transport. So no subsidy should be necessary, as it is always with traditional public transport.
In the longer term, PodCars could attract private investors, including real estate developers, looking to increase the value of their properties through faster connections to central business areas. Global expansion is also a real possibility. It's not only Sweden that's planning to implement a system like this. Several other cities around the world are also considering their own systems, including the carbon-neutral city of Mazda in Abu Dhabi, Shanghai in China, and several cities in the US, including Ithaca in upstate New York. Jacob Allen Roberts is head of a delegation from Ithaca currently visiting Sweden to see how they might implement their own system. He believes PRT could provide the kind of super convenient public transport to get Americans out of their cars.
The AAA just did a study that said on average the cost of owning an automobile is $8,000 to $10,000 per year, regardless of the model, regardless of the socioeconomic status of the owner. So I think if public transportation becomes a viable resource in America, which it used to be 100 years ago, I think more and more people will be happy to put their car in the garage or become part of car share for those times when they do want to take a drive in the countryside or need a van to go pick up hardware or something like that. There's a use for those types of services. But for the 90% of trips to just get to and from your basic everyday, routine, public transit works really, really well.
Sweden will announce which city will have the first PodCar network in October 2010, Once things are up and running, PRT's supporters hope that it will demonstrate to the world that podcasts are not only environmentally friendly, but also safe, convenient, and affordable. If it can also demonstrate to potential investors that they can be profitable, then the system has almost unlimited possibilities.
So I'm going to end this video here and pick up where we left off, but you can see my cameo there in Stockholm. I was able to go back and forth to Europe a number of times in research of this technology, and I'm going to touch on in the next video what I was able to bring back here to the United States, back to Ithaca, and what's become of it.